In our number 10 spot, we have Charles Manson. This interview was honestly kind of fascinating to me, as all I knew about Charles Manson prior to this interview was that he was known to have been a cult leader and to have killed several people. But this interview really gave me a sneak peek into how he thinks and what his personality was kind of like, and it's kind of fascinating to watch. I'm referring to his 60 Minutes interview from 1981, where for the first time he discusses the crimes he was accused of and what it's like being in prison. Manson goes on to continuously deny that he ever killed anyone, with briefly admitting to cutting an ear off. The interview starts off with the host saying, "You were sentenced to the gas chamber until they modified the death penalty. Were you happy that was done?" To which Manson replied, "Oh, I knew I wasn't going to the gas chamber because I hadn't done anything wrong." The most unsettling part of this interview to me was honestly how every so often he would say such wise statements. I guess it was just him and his brain for many years in prison, but still, it's kind of hard to even fathom a killer with any kind of somewhat positive trait. You box them obviously into a category of just plain evil and forget that they have other layers, which is quite chilling. When asked about how he feels about spending his life in prison, he replied, "Well, we are all our own prisons, and we're each our own wardens, and we do our own times, and we get stuck in our own little traps, and we kinda judge ourselves the way that we do. You know, I can't judge anybody else. The best thing I can do is judge myself and try to live with that." In our number 9 spot, we have Jeffrey Dahmer. In an interview from 1993, Inside Edition gives us a very in-depth interview with Jeffrey Dahmer. A once chocolate factory worker became a serial killer who even ate some of his victims' body parts. How did a boy that grew up in a hard-working middle-class family turn into this monster? Well, the interview is quite definitely freaky, as he goes into depth as to what his thought process was like before all of his killings. The interviewer goes on about how he presents himself as intelligent and articulate, and that is probably why so many people did not think him to be a killer. When he refers to some of his killings, he speaks about blacking out and not remembering them, but he would photograph them to remember their physical beauty. He speaks about an altar he created with the 10 different skulls of the people he took the lives of. He said, "I had these obsessive thoughts and desires, thoughts wanting to control them, to possess them permanently. I killed them not because I was angry with them, but because I wanted to keep them with me. As my obsession grew, I started saving body parts such as skulls." Pretty chilling and uncomfortable to watch. In our number 8 spot, we have Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy is of course known as being an American serial killer. He took the lives of at least 20 women over the course of a few years leading up to his arrest in 1979. There are many interviews with Ted, but the one I found fascinating is the one where he is still denying any of the crimes that he was being accused of. And this is an interview done in Glenwood Springs, Colorado jail on March 17th, 1977. In this interview, he's just so calm and laughing off the accusations. He's so suave and engaging, and you can truly see how he was able to get away with what he had done for so long. He had a way with words and knew how to control his emotions quite well. It's truly very fascinating to watch. It wasn't until 1989, before he was killed for his crimes, did he confess to everything that he was accused of. Coming up in our number 7 spot, we have Beth Thomas. In this extremely chilling interview with a 6-year-old, Beth Thomas was being interviewed for an HBO special in 1990 where she discussed all of the horrible things that she wanted to do to her brother and her adoptive parents. She speaks without any sign of remorse, and it's truly frightening to watch. Her big blue eyes make you think that she's not from this world. She speaks about wanting to take the life of her family and how she likes to hurt them in the night so they have to lock her door. Eventually, after this interview, Beth was diagnosed with a disease called reactive attachment disorder, a rare condition in young children characterized by failing to make healthy connections with caregivers due to being extremely hurt by their parents. Beth apparently was hurt and neglected by her biological parents. This story does have a happy ending though. Apparently, Beth has made a full recovery after many years of therapy, and she is now an award-winning nurse and author. Gotta love a happy ending after a very frightening beginning. In our number 6 spot, we have Aileen Wuornos. Aileen is another American serial killer that was charged with the killings of 7 males. Apparently, Aileen was engaging in the selling of her body when she robbed and killed 7 of her clients. She claimed that it was self-defense all 7 times, but in an interview done for 60 Minutes Australia, Aileen gives us a sneak peek into her mind, and it is clear that it was absolutely not self-defense, as she goes on to talk about how it was only 7 people. She goes on to justify that what she did was not a horrendous crime, but since she's been betrayed, she does care to leave this planet. Another really weird thing about this interview is her new mother. After hearing about her case, some random person reached out to her and adopted her. Very suspicious and quite weird / chilling, just as much as the interview with Aileen. Aileen was on death row for 12 years before being executed in the state of Florida. The famous movie Monster starring Charlize Theron is based on Aileen's life. In our number 5 spot we have The Good Doctor. Also known as Dr. Death, Harold Shipman is arguably one of the scariest people on this list. He was a British family doctor who had gained the trust of so many patients in England. He was estimated to have killed over 200 people. He was found guilty for at least 15 killings of patients under his care and was sentenced to life in prison. This is a very brief 2-part interview of him where he honestly seems the most normal. He just looks a bit agitated that he was being filmed in the second clip, but in the first clip, he's just a regular guy that seems like he knows how to do his job pretty well, which is truly terrifying. To think that you want to put your faith in your doctors, but then who knows, there might be another Dr. Death among them that might have the intention to hurt you. What's wild to me is that he lived in a town 10 minutes away from where my mom grew up in England, so he could have been her doctor. Terrifying. In our number 4 spot, we have Israel Kayes. Israel is known for killing 11 victims, and it wasn't until the day of his death was this confirmed officially, as he left a note along with drawings of 11 skulls marked with his blood. This is an interview of him done by the FBI where they are trying to piece together everything that he's done. Apparently, the FBI interviewed him over 25 times in 8 months before he ended up taking his own life in his cell. In this interview, he seems way too normal, which seems to be a theme of all of these people today. Apparently, he did admit to a few violent crimes in 1996. Also, allegedly, he used the hair and clothes from his victims as disguises for future crimes, and one time, apparently, he partially thawed a frozen victim and posed her for a proof of life photo after she had been dead in his shed for 2 weeks while he was on a cruise with his family. Holy moly. How in the world did this guy have a job and just seemingly appear to be a normal human while this was happening in his life? I do not know. In our number 3 spot, we have Ed Kemper. This is an interview from 1984 with another American serial killer by the name of Ed Kemper. At the age of 15, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia when he killed his grandparents. He was put into a hospital for the criminally insane, but for some reason was let out by the age of 21, and that is when he went on a killing spree on a university campus in California where his mother worked. He took the life of 6 hitchhikers and then went on to take the life of his mother and best friend. In this interview, he discusses so calmly how he is someone who has been killing people for almost 20 years. He goes on to describe his thought process of how he was, quote, raging inside. I was commanding. He goes on to talk about how his mom had anger towards men and would take it out on him. He then goes on to describe that one of the factors for why he did what he did was possibly because he was emotionally impotent. Quote, I was scared to death at failing at male-female relationships. Apparently, Ed asked for the death penalty after he was found sane and guilty, however was given 8 concurrent life sentences in prison as capital punishment was suspended in California at that time. A chilling interview that really is worth the watch. In our number 2 spot, we have Keith Hunter Jesperson. Keith is a Canadian-American serial killer that was once a truck driver. He branded himself as the happy face killer. What, was he inspired by the wet bandits from Home Alone? The theatrics right there must have showcased that he was clearly insane to some extent. But in this case, he apparently was proven to be sane. Just evil. In this video, he is making a full confession via audio to his 8 killings, and he talks about not understanding why he did them. He started drawing a smiley face symbol to tempt investigators to track him. Apparently, he once boasted about hurting a girl, and there were confessions on a wall where he wrote, "I killed Tanya Bennett," one of his many victims. Pretty horrendous. In this video, we also see him in the courtroom going into detail about how he killed his victims, and it's pretty gruesome to hear. Would not recommend watching this right before bed. Or ever. In our number 1 spot, we have John Wayne Gacy. This is the notorious clown killer of the 70s and early 80s. There is an interview done with him almost 14 years after he was convicted of killing 33 times, and in this interview, he is still claiming that he is innocent and was framed. He said that he took a truth serum that has shown that he did not commit these crimes. I'm sorry, are we in Harry Potter? How did I not know that this existed? Apparently, it's a psychedelic serum that is supposed to make people more suggestible and their memories subject to reconstruction and fabrication. Interesting. Well, in any case, this interview is fascinating to see as he seems way too normal and goes on to talk about the fact that he's a good man. A family man. It's hard to believe that he committed such horrible acts until he has a little slip up saying that one of the people that they are talking about, quote, is not one of the people that I killed. Yikes. Starting off this countdown, we have Stephen McDaniel.
Yeah, Lauren was my neighbor. We're just trying to find out where she is at this point. I mean, no one has seen her since Saturday. I mean, the last time anyone heard from her was an email that she sent out, and no one's heard from her since.
In June of 2011, Stephen McDaniel killed his neighbor and classmate Lauren Giddings. Apparently, he had a fantasy of committing the perfect murder, but this murder was anything but perfect, and he got caught pretty soon. So the day her body was found, Stephen actually was interviewed by a news station. Throughout his whole interview, he tries to act concerned and shocked by her disappearance.
Do you know anybody any enemies she might have had, somebody that might want to hurt her?
No, we don't know where she is. I mean, the only thing we can think is that maybe she went out running and someone snatched her.
He also tries to make it seem like she got killed after going out for a run. But throughout the interview, he makes it clear that he knew far more about Lauren than he had let on. At one point, the interview informs him that her body was found. And you can see the moment that he realized he was screwed.
We just don't know where she is.
What about in the parking lot area? I know they've been doing a lot of, I think that's where they have recovered the body or whatever they recovered from there.
Body?
Had you seen anything there? Had you seen anything there? I mean, we don't know if this is the same person. You know what I mean? Like, they took out a body there earlier. We don't know if it's the same person or not. That's how we're trying to ask people if they know who lived there. Are you okay, sir?
After taking a second to regroup himself, he continues on with the interview, but you can tell he knows he's been caught.
I don't know anyone that would want to hurt her. She was as nice a person as there is.
In 2014, McDaniel pleaded guilty to the murder. And if you guys are liking this video so far, then make sure to give it a big thumbs up. Also, make sure to check out part 1 to this video. Coming in at number 9, we have Wayne.
With a psychopath, I would argue that emotion is like being colorblind for them, and nothing we can do is actually going to instill a sense of empathy. This is really a waste of time.
This man, only referred to as Wayne, was the subject of the 2000 Channel 4 documentary titled Psychopath. Now, I couldn't find much about him besides what the documentary said, but apparently Wayne stabbed and killed someone that pissed him off. That still hasn't been verified, but that's what the rumors are. But what's startling is how he got an extremely rare score of 40 out of 40 on the psychopathy checklist. Like, this dude is on another level.
The therapists are wonderful. I learn a great deal from them. Sometimes it can be hard. I suppose that's the way it's supposed to be when you're growing up. I'm ready to go now. I know that that decision will come from others who have already seen They seen my change.
It's creepy how he's trying to convince the therapist that he's fine and should be let out. In our 8th spot, we have the grave robber. Now, I for sure have talked about this video before, but it definitely deserves a spot on this list. This interview is with an unidentified teen from the 90s. In the video, he talks all about how he robs graves and then proceeds to tell us how to do it and how to do it so you don't get caught and what to do afterwards with the body parts.
Now, so what you do is you grab it around here. You grab it here and peel it back like that. Okay? Peel it back. Alright? And it'll pull off. It'll make a disgusting sound.
Throughout this whole video, he's holding a real life skull that he robbed from someone's grave. Now, what's creepy about this video is that no one knows who this guy is. Rumor has it that the video surfaced on the dark web and later got leaked and then uploaded to YouTube, but we don't know for sure. Like, just look at how creepy this is.
Right, there's a piece of the brains. Let's see. Right, there's another piece of the brains. If I had something wet here, I would wet them up and let you see how the brains look.
It's honestly very unsettling. And he also gives us tips for how not to get caught.
Never leave witnesses. If you have to knock them out so that way they think it's a dream. It's best not to kill, but if it's necessary, do it.
Like, who is this video for? And why did he make it? Moving on to number 7, we have Edmund Kemper. Ed Kemper, also known as Big Ed, is an American serial killer who killed 10 individuals. It all started back in 1964 when Ed killed his grandparents at the age of 15. He claimed that he killed them just to see what it felt like.
Saying I'd wanted to kill my mother since I was 8 years old, and I'm not proud of that. It started with surrogates at a non-human level. Physical objects, my possessions, other people's, destruction of things that are cared about, and then destruction of things that are living on a lower level, small animals, insects, animals, and then finally people.
As he said in this interview, he literally had an urge to kill since he was young. After the death of his grandparents, he was locked away for 5 years. Then in 1969, he was released at the age of 21. But he didn't learn his lesson because he went on to murder 8 more individuals, one of them being his own mother. Eventually, he was convicted again. Here we have him talking about his first murder, his grandparents.
It started coming to a head again, so I went back down. I ran away back down there. And then a month later, I'm up living with my grandparents in the mountains, and 10 months later, I murdered them. It made it worse to be on top of a mountain. I was literally on top of a mountain when it happened. And I sensed everybody in the world just stopping what they were doing, turning around, saw what I did, and are coming to get me. And I knew I was paranoid at that moment. I knew anybody that came up there and gave me a funny look or a fishy eye or quizzical look, I'd have blown their brains out thinking they were coming to get me.
In our 6th spot, we have Kevin Davis. This interview is very disturbing to watch, so be warned. On March 27th, 2010, Kevin Davis killed his mother, Kimberly Hill. That morning, he asked his mom if he could take his own life, and Kimberly basically kind of just dismissed him. And that was not the answer he was hoping for. I guess he wanted his mother to fight for him to live. So he ended up killing his mother instead. In this interview, he calmly tells exactly what he did to his mom. Every last detail.
I tried to strangle her with a cord. Ripped the cord from a video game console controller. That didn't work. She was sitting on the couch watching TV. Okay. That didn't work out too well. She started screaming, and so I went to her room, opened a drawer at the very bottom to the right. I pulled out a hammer.
Then you can guess what he did with that hammer. But it doesn't stop there.
That's when you reached in and grabbed the brain?
Yeah, I kicked at it a bit. Then I just, that was kind of silly, but I just decided to reach in and kind of just...
That is horrifying. But that's not all he did to his poor mother, but it's far too disturbing to talk about this case any further. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Liam McCatsney. On December 2nd, 2016, Sarah Stern went missing. Who's to blame for this? Her friends, Liam McCatsney and Preston Taylor. Basically, Liam had learned that Sarah had been left a large sum of money from her mother when she passed away. She told Liam about this, and Liam and Preston made a plan to kill her and then steal the money. But they were caught after a former friend secretly videotaped Liam's confession.
Yeah, and dude, alright, so I'm hanging out with her. she has, we went to the bank, she took some money out, not all of her money. We're counting it out, and then she goes to walk out the front door. I choke her out, drag her. My biggest problem was the dog.
So Liam had went to Sarah's house, strangled her, and then stole $9,000. Less than he thought there was, but that was because Sarah spent a lot of the money already. The saddest part is during the taping when he said exactly how he killed her.
It took me a half an hour to kill her. I thought I was going to be able to choke her out and have her out in like a couple minutes.
After that, the two threw her body over a bridge. It's so disturbing. Like, Sarah thought that she could trust Liam. She never thought that he would take her life. Coming in at number 4, we have John Wayne Gacy. Chances are you've heard of him. He was an American serial killer often called the Killer Clown. He got his name since he would dress up as Pogo the Clown for neighborhood events or children's parties. Over several years, Gacy murdered 33 people. In 1978, Gacy was finally caught. The interview you are about to see was the first time he ever did an interview about the case. It was filmed while he was on death row. And he did it to try and get people to see that he was innocent. He's not innocent though.
People don't want to know the truth and the honesty of it. If they want to be convinced or brainwashed into what they believe, then fine, then go ahead and kill me. But vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, because you will have executed somebody that didn't commit the crime.
He thinks people were brainwashed into thinking he killed those people, even though all the evidence suggests that he did. Like, they were found all over his property.
When they paint the image that I was this monster who picked up like these altar boys along the street and swatted them like flies, I said, this is ludicrous.
The craziest part of the interview is that Gacy claims to have taken a high amount of truth serum and even then maintained his innocence.
Taking 3.5 hours of truth serum. And under sodium amytal, the maximum amount that I could have, it shows that I have no knowledge of the crime whatsoever.
But there's absolutely no proof anywhere that he even took truth serum. So there you go. He's a creepy liar and killer. In our third spot, we have Michael Ross.
Well, I'm a serial killer. I've killed 8 women, 6 in this state and 2 in New York.
Michael Ross was an American serial killer that between 1981 to 1984 murdered 8 women. What's creepy is how in his interview, he just calmly straight up admits that he's a serial killer, as if it's no big deal. He then proceeds to say that it's only 8 women that he's killed. Other people have higher counts. It's as if he finds it okay because the number is small to him.
I'm not a big serial killer, by the way. 8 people, that's nothing. I mean, there's a lot of other guys you can go see.
Now, another part about this interview that creeps me out, much like the others on this list, is how he recounts the time he killed his victim.
I saw this woman walking along the road with a stroller. I pulled off the side of the road. She came into the driveway, walked up the driveway. I was behind the house. She saw me and I grabbed her.
On July 6, 1987, he was sentenced to death. He spent 18 years on death row and then was executed in May of 2005. Moving on, number 2, we have Gerard John Schaefer.
Mr. Schaefer, how long have you been imprisoned?
Since 1973.
And what are you accused of?
Well, do you mean what am I convicted of or what am I accused of? I'm accused of a lot more than I'm convicted of.
This guy is so arrogant, also very creepy. So Gerard Schaefer was a former sheriff's deputy that used his title to kill women. Now, it's thought that he was a serial killer, but this has never been proved. But he was found guilty of murdering 2 women.
First, what are you accused of?
Well, I was accused of originally accused of killing 34 women. But nobody has ever managed to come up with 34 names, jurisdictions, or anything else. It's a false accusation.
So basically, on July 21st, 1973, Schaefer pulled over 2 girls who were hitchhiking, saying that it was illegal in the country, which it wasn't. He then drove them to a swamp area and tied them to a tree. But the girls were lucky. Schaefer was going to shoot them, but right before he was about to, he got a call on his police radio. So he went back to his car to check on it. And when he did, the girls managed to escape and report him. He was then arrested for unlawful imprisonment and aggravated assault. 2 months after he posted bail, he abducted 2 more female hitchhikers, but this time he actually took their lives.
And what is your conviction?
I was convicted of killing 2 in Fort Pierce. I was never shown to be at the crime scene. There was never any link between me and the people that were killed, except the testimony of the mother of one of them.
He's so creepy. Also, notice that he barely blinks. This guy just gives me the heebie-jeebies. In our number 1 spot, we have Issei Sagawa. This case is incredibly messed up and extremely dark. It literally made me feel sick to my stomach just researching about it. So Issei Sagawa is a Japanese man who in 1981 killed and ate a woman named Renee Hartvelt in Paris. But he was never truly convicted of his crimes. He literally only spent 2 days in jail and then was sent back to Japan. And when he was there, he became famous. So famous that he made a living through the public's interest in his crime. Imagine that, literally becoming wealthy for killing someone.
I don't want to kill, but I couldn't find any way to eat the girl's meat fresh, so I thought I have to kill.
So Sagawa apparently had a fantasy to eat beautiful women. He apparently chose Renee because she was beautiful and he wanted to absorb her energy. On June 11th, 1981, he invited Renee over and shot her at the back of the neck. He then ate her over the next 2 days. Gary Ridgway. Gary Ridgway, otherwise known as the Green River Killer, took the lives of 48 women between 1980 to 1990. But it's believed that his number may be as high as 71 people. He gets his name due to the fact that he would dump the bodies along riverbanks in South King County. In 2001, he was arrested. After his conviction, he did an interview where he talked all about his murders and how he had the desire to kill ever since he was little.
But I took my aggression on, I couldn't take it on my mom, I had to take it on my animals. And
as stated in the interview, he confessed that he started killing at a young age. He had this built-up anger towards his mom, but he couldn't harm her, so he would harm animals instead.
Living things? Living things, killing animals.
Okay.
Killing animals.
In this interview, he went on to talk more about his victims in detail. Hearing someone confess to murder is just very, very disturbing. In our 9th spot, we have John Hughes. But before I go any further, make sure to hit that thumbs up button because it really helps us out.
I don't think like normal people, never have. I have racing thoughts, it's been that way since I was a kid. I'm constantly, it doesn't matter if I'm sleeping, if I'm awake, I'm constantly thinking of 100 things at one time.
John Hughes considers himself the Antichrist. He was arrested back in 2008 after killing a trucker at a rest stop along Interstate 29. This dude is intense and incredibly scary. He claims to have killed 15 to 20 people, but that hasn't been confirmed yet. Either way, in this interview for KMBC News, Lara Moretz gets the chance to interview him. And he talks about the people he has taken the lives of and why he did this.
Rest area, and that was a way for me to gain control, to show, I don't know, I guess I would assert my dominance, I guess you could say. That'd be the way to put it. And it shut everybody up for a while.
The scariest part of the interview is when Lara asks if he feels bad about killing people. And this was his response.
I don't feel bad about killing anyone.
Not personally, that I've personally done myself, no. I just view things as objects. People, animals, trees, cars, they're just all the same to me.
So no, he feels no remorse. In our 8th spot, we have Jose Martinez.
Explanation because I want to get them. I didn't want the cops to find them. I want to find them myself. We went to this little house. We broke in there and we find one, I shot him.
This dude is one you never want to mess with. And he reveals why during his interview. Basically, Jose was a hitman for a drug cartel. He admitted to killing 36 people as a hitman, and dozens of others just on his own, many of whom were people that just pissed him off. For example, in this interview he talks about one of his brother-in-law's friends. Whenever the friend would visit, he would tell him to park on the side of the road, not on his driveway. He told him this a number of times, yet he still continued to park on the driveway. So what did he do? He asked the guy to take him for a ride in his truck. He then shot him, just to teach him a lesson.
I told him, didn't I told you not to park in my driveway? And he said he didn't listen to nobody except his mother. Okay.
Moving on, at number 7 we have Charles Manson. Charles Manson was an infamous cult leader who got his followers to carry out a number of murders in the late 1960s. Manson is probably best known for the killing of the actress Sharon Tate. Well, in 1988 he did an interview and people were terribly freaked out by it. In the interview, he is talking gibberish. Half the stuff he says just doesn't make sense. Interviewer Geraldo Rivera tries to understand what Charles is going on about. At one point, Charles just gets so mad at him and starts yelling at him.
No, you who else knows what else you do? Whoa, I said, you haven't seen the bloody trail yet. You haven't seen the bloody trail yet. What do you mean? Oh, it's been worse than that. You think, oh, the 9 was just the first little marbles in the bucket. There's a whole row of people out there that's been getting killed.
At another point, he says, all you want to do is sell death, blood, and fear. So, that's creepy. And then at another point, he just gets up and starts doing this weird dance.
Yeah, I make the laws from here.
Which, according to a number of sources, he did this in a number of interviews randomly. He did this to avoid prison, so people would be like, oh, he's not in the right set of mind, he needs to be placed elsewhere. Moving on, at number 6 we have Otis Toole. Otis Toole, or the Jacksonville Cannibal, is a serial killer convicted of 6 counts of murder. He's most famous for killing the son of America's Most Wanted host, John Walsh. In an interview from 1993, we see how dark and twisted Toole really is. He would talk about his dark desires, like watching an entire city burn. He then went on to justify his killings, saying that taking someone's life is no different than stepping on a bug or eating animal meat. There's way more disturbing stuff that he discusses, but it's just too much to talk about on YouTube. Like, he goes into depth about his killings. It's way too much to hear. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Joel Rifkin.
Tragedy happens in lives. Unfortunately, it was their lives.
The world wouldn't know his name until after his killing spree had ended. Now, in a rare prison interview, serial killer Joel Rifkin talks about his sickening crimes down to the smallest detail.
Joel Rifkin was an American serial killer responsible for taking the lives of 17 women in the 1990s. He was caught in 1993 when cops pulled him over for a missing license plate. But to their horrors, they found his latest victim in his trunk. He was then sentenced to 203 years in prison. In this interview, Joel just seems so proud of himself when he's recalling his crimes. He also talks about the police's interrogation process and why he confessed to the crimes. The most disturbing thing though is when he admits to keeping trophies from each of his victims. He said he did this so that he could remember each victim and what he did to them. As
The numbers started to increase. An ID would, okay, that has a photo, I know who that girl was, or a piece of jewelry, okay, I know that it's from that girl.
In our 4th spot, we have Israel Keys. Israel Keys started his killings in 1996 and continued on until March of 2012 when he was finally arrested. He was known for traveling to a number of locations to commit his crimes. Then he would rob banks and homes so that he could afford to travel to kill. In this interview, we see him talk about his killings and how he selected his victims.
When I was smart, I would let them come to me. Just remote area.
People just found it gross how calmly he talks about this all while eating a bagel and drinking. He continued on saying what his strategy was, and that was to grab people in remote locations like parks and campgrounds, even cemeteries.
You might not get exactly what you're looking for. There's not as much to choose from in a manner of speaking, but there's also no witnesses really. There's nobody else around.
In our 3rd spot, we have Chris Watts. If you've seen the Netflix documentary on Chris Watts and his family, then you know how messed up this whole story is. Chris is guilty of killing his wife and their 2 daughters. When he was brought into questioning, he denied having anything to do with this. But after failing the polygraph test, the police started nailing him hard. That's when he came up with this elaborate lie about what happened.
After that, I helped me downstairs and I want to protect her. What? I want to protect her.
It's crazy seeing him put on this whole show and turning his wife into a criminal, saying she was the one that hurt their daughters and then he hurt her as a result.
She hurt him, yeah. And well, no, not her. He hurt her.
In the end, the officers saw right through his fabricated story. But still, it's crazy. Moving on to number 2, we have Richard Kuklinski.
I could get over on you, get you to do what I wanted you to do, is to hurt your family.
Richard started killing at a very young age. He committed his first murder when he was just 13 years old. Over the span of his career, he took the lives of around 200 people. Could even be more. I mean, he would often kill homeless people just for fun. On top of that, he worked as a hitman for the mafia. So yeah, his count is pretty high. It was revealed that any person who was ever deemed his friend was eventually killed off by him. In 1988, he was caught by an undercover cop and sent to prison. In this interview, it is truly disturbing to see the lack of remorse he has. Listen to him talk about him shooting a guy.
And I went pop, 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 and I went pop, pop. And I could see the material moving on his jacket as these things. Actually, they made little marks on it, on the jacket. I guess they were burn marks.
I think the scariest part was all of a sudden during the interview, he gets this messed up smile on his face and just stares at the interviewer for an uncomfortable amount of time. I legit got uncomfortable for the interviewer. And then, after that long, unbearable pause, he starts asking the interviewer questions.
What do you think about me? Anything good, bad, or indifferent?
It just made me cringe. It's so bad. And in our number 1 spot, we have Zachary Davis. This interview gave me the chills. It makes me so uncomfortable. So this is the interview of Zachary Davis. In August of 2012, he took his mother's life before trying to set his house on fire with his brother inside. Now, Zachary has been diagnosed with a number of mental illnesses, including schizophrenia and depressive disorder. In 2007, when he was 9 years old, his father passed away from ALS, and that apparently started this all. He just spiraled out of control and became withdrawn. He even had an app on his phone about serial killers, and in his notebooks he would write about disturbing things, like you can't spell slaughter without laughter. The creepiest part of this interview is when Dr. Phil asks him about the murder weapon, which was a sledgehammer. At one point while discussing it, he literally smiles as if he's proud of what he did. Starting off this countdown, we have the psychopath's behavior.
When I was the punisher, I was the one who decided punishment over the I was the one who spanked the
This interview features a man named Robert who has been deemed a psychopath. In the interview, he talks about the crimes he has committed and his thought processes as he commits these crimes, or lack thereof. What's horrifying is how candidly he talks about this all, and how he's proud of his crimes. He also shows no shame or guilt.
I would tell myself, well, she's not going to be like that. She is going to be the perfect mate. And I told myself that.
Just then, he was talking about a young girl he took advantage of, and basically coerced her into having a relationship with him. You can tell he got a sense of pleasure while talking about what he did to that individual. It's very sickening.
I was grooming her to fit me. To fit me.
It's so creepy how he is so calm while talking about all of this. Again, he's gaining this sense of pleasure just thinking back to his crimes.
In our number 9 spot today, we have John Battaglia.
John Battaglia is certainly quite a piece of work. On May 2nd, 2001, the mother of his 2 daughters dropped the girls off for their weekly visit with their father. Unfortunately, instead of having dinner like they were supposed to, John ended up killing the girls instead. I'm not going to go into any of the details of that because it is obviously an incredibly horrible situation, but he did do this while on the phone with the girl's mother, and he says that his dislike for her is the reason behind these killings. Whether that is true or not, I just want to make it absolutely clear that there is never a good enough reason to do something like this. After deliberating for just 19 minutes, the jury in his trial found him guilty of the highest charge, which is capital murder. On February 1st, 2018 at 9:40 p.m., John was executed by the state. John has always held up this act of the doting and devoted father, and hearing him talk about the girls is incredibly chilling. He talks about them with a sense of pride and love, like he didn't do one of the most evil things in the entire world.
In marriage, she'd stomach about 8 or 9 months, pregnant when she took that picture.
And when you think about that, like, what do you think about?
I mean, you think about your best little friend. Nicest little kid they ever knew.
Also, how he continues to blame his ex-wife for the death of his children is pretty telling of just how messed up his mind really was.
She ruined my daughter's life, and she ruined my daughter.
I mean, do you feel like you were killing them to get back at your
I don't feel like I killed.
You what?
I don't feel like I killed.
Coming in at number 8, we have Susan Atkins.
But that we were instructed to go all the way down every house, hit every house on the
street?
On the street, yes.
And kill all the people in those houses.
People in all those houses.
Susan Atkins was an American murderer and loyal member of the Manson cult. She participated in 8 killings, all under the order of Charles Manson. In the cult, she went by the name Sadie Mae Flutes, or Sexy Sadie. She also played a role in the killing of famous actress Sharon Tate. In this interview, Susan talks about the Tate murder.
And we drove to the house with instructions to kill everyone in the house.
From Charlie?
Yeah.
Now, what made people mad about this interview is they claimed that Susan was trying to act like a victim. She was trying to gain sympathy to lessen her sentence.
The people in the house were all brought into the living room and tied up, and I remember that Wojtek Bakowski, I believe is his name. I had tied his hands with a towel and then was instructed to kill him.
Whether she has actual remorse or not, hearing her recount the night of this dark deed is very creepy. In our 7th spot, we have Bernard Giles.
Wife and daughter, and something hit you and you went,
no.
Today may be the day?
Every day may be the day.
Every day?
Every day may be the day.
In this interview, serial killer Bernard Giles recounts his first murder to Piers Morgan. It is so chilling to hear him talk in depth about what he did to Nancy Jerry. He told Morgan that he picked her up and drove her to a wooded area where he did the deed. What's scary is that out of all the people Morgan has interviewed, Bernard is the first one who didn't try to prove his innocence. He openly admits that he's guilty and has killed people. At the beginning of the interview, Morgan says, and I quote, "You are serving 5 life sentences for killing 5 young women. My first question is, did you kill those women?" And he calmly replies with, "Yes, sir, I did." This dude has no remorse and no emotions. He even admits to it. What a creepy dude.
In our number 6 spot today, we have Tommy Lynn Sells. Tommy Lynn Sells was an American serial killer who is responsible for 22 confirmed deaths, but authorities have said that they know there are more. One of the aspects that scares me the most while watching him talk about his crimes is how you can tell that he committed these acts because he wanted to and because he liked it.
It was the best feeling I ever had in my life. And the first time I killed somebody, it was such a rush. And it was just like that shot of dope. Every time I did it, it was that rush again.
There is no doubt that Tommy is an actual psychopath, but on December 31st in 1999, Tommy messed with the wrong girl. After severely injuring Crystal Searles, who he thought was dead, this incredible young girl was able to walk a quarter of a mile with a severed trachea to her neighbor's house, where they of course got her help. Crystal ended up surviving and gave such a good description of Tommy, and in the end was able to identify him to the authorities. Crystal not only survived her own absolute nightmare, but she most definitely saved who knows how many lives with her bravery. In watching Tommy talk about his crimes, there is clearly just a lack of emotion or an emptiness behind his eyes.
If I called you something that you didn't like, you'd think about killing me?
Well, if we was in a fight and, get your head down in the concrete, then, so be it, but...
What happens when my head goes down to the concrete?
Well, what do you think happens? It cracks like a coconut.
Tommy ended up being executed on April 3rd, 2014. In our number 5 spot today, we have Alex Enriquez. Alex Enriquez is more commonly known as the Bronx serial killer. Alex is convicted of killing 3 females from 1989 to 1990 and is currently serving 3 consecutive 25 years to life sentences. Alex has been incarcerated since the early 90s, but still to this day maintains that he was innocent. There wasn't an overwhelming amount of physical evidence in this case, but there was a detail that Alex gave to authorities in an interrogation that was true to the crime, but it was a fact that police didn't even know at the time, so how could Alex have possibly known this? A few years ago, Alex sat down with Piers Morgan for an interview where he of course claimed his innocence, while also telling some pretty confusing stories.
The bodies.
You gave them a particular piece of information.
Because they told me.
But they did not know. How could they tell you something they didn't know?
That's what they tell you.
They hadn't cleaned the garment, so they're lying too.
Do you really think they said the truth?
There was also a witness testimony from a man who saw and spoke to Alex at one of his crime scenes on the night that it was committed, and of course Alex had some excuse for why this was untrue.
Says he saw you there.
Do you believe that? Have you seen...
You tell me, were you there?
No, I wasn't there.
I'm not sure about you guys, but this part definitely gives me major OJ if I did it vibes. At the end of the day, maybe he did not commit these crimes, and it would of course be extremely tragic that he has been wrongly convicted, but if he did in fact commit these crimes, it's pretty unsettling that after all these years, he still just can't even admit it.
In our 4th spot, we have Ed Kemper. I featured Ed in part 2 of this series, but I think this other interview he did was worse than the first one. So Ed Kemper, or Big Ed, is an American serial killer who took the lives of 10 individuals. This reign started back in 1964, when he took the lives of his grandparents. And he said he did it just to see what killing felt like. This hour-and-a-half interview was filmed in 1991 when Ed was 42 years old. I think what makes this so disturbing is how smart he is.
Extended period of time, and then in the early 80s they came up with this differentiation called serial killing, which was living 2 lives basically. If one orients to the negative side of that living, he would say this person was living a cover life.
He's very well spoken, and in the interview he went on to describe his tendencies and why he thinks he became a killer, and how he thinks young people need to be supported so they don't end up like him.
Getting youngsters like that help to where they can find themselves and they can find value in themselves and they can find value in interacting with others, and they go in a different direction than what I did.
It's crazy and creepy. Like, this dude is too smart for his own good. In our 3rd spot, we have Jodi Arias. On June 4th, 2008, Jodi Arias took the life of her boyfriend, Travis Alexander. He was in the shower at the time of his death. It's really brutal what she did to him. After she did the deed, she took photos of him on her camera and then threw it in the washing machine as an attempt to get rid of evidence. But upon investigating, her DNA, among other things, were found at the crime scene and she was arrested. So this interview was conducted after her trial. People were outraged by the number of lies she tells in this interview.
Was it unexpected, you think, this verdict?
It was unexpected. For me, yes, because there was no premeditation on my part. I can see how things look that way, but I didn't expect the premeditation. I could see maybe the felony murder because of how the law is written.
She claims the murder wasn't premeditated, but her actions say otherwise. She had it all planned out. She took his life and then dyed her hair, rented a car, cleaned up the crime scene, and fled. In the interview, she also tries to gain sympathy from the watchers. You can tell she's putting on a face of sorrow. You even see her clock the camera, and then when she realizes she's being recorded, that's when that whole act began. It's really scary and dark.
In our number 2 spot today, we have Ted Bundy. If you know anything about true crime, you most definitely have heard of one of the most famous killers of all time, Ted Bundy. Ted killed upwards of 30 people during his crime spree in the 1970s. Most interviews with Ted are extremely well known, but there is one interview that is very disturbing that is not quite as popular as the others. In this interview, he is talking about taking the life of 18-year-old student Georgianne Hawkins. The chilling part of it is how he talks about things just so matter-of-factly, like it's a casual conversation between friends and not him describing the horrific acts that he committed.
She was quite lucid, talking about things. It's funny, it's not funny, but it's odd the kinds of things people say under those circumstances. She had a Spanish test the next day, and she thought that I had taken her to help tutor me for a Spanish test.
After that clip, this interview unfortunately gets even more disturbing as he begins whispering some more terrifying details. When I first saw this interview, I was listening through headphones, and you guys, the chill you get from having an absolute monster whispering in your ear is truly incomparable.
The Hawkins girl's head was severed and taken up the road about 25 to 50 yards. And buried in a location about 10 yards west of the road on a rocky hillside.
After that horrible whispering part, he continues on with the rest of the details of that day in the same casual conversation tone that we heard before. If it wasn't obvious before, after listening to this specific interview, it is very clear just how disturbing Ted Bundy really was. In our number 1 spot today, we have Michael Turner. In 2008, Michael Turner fatally shot his wife as she was about to end their relationship and also was planning to turn him into the authorities. In the process of this terrible crime, he also injured 2 of their. As far as I know, the injuries to the were accidental, but this obviously does not take away from the terrible thing that he did, as well as the fact of that is literally one of the many reasons why you shouldn't kill someone. In a jailhouse interview, Michael gives a chilling account of what happened on that day, as well as discussing intention and motive. There is a part where he is discussing how he loves his kids and how they love him.
You say you love your kids?
Man, as you see, I've been up for them since I've been home from prison. Hell yeah, I love my kids. And my kids love me, you hear me? I don't know if they still do. But I know my son told me shit before he left. Before I left the house, he told me shit, Daddy, he still love me. You know what I'm saying?
But then later, when asked about how he could love his kids and then harm their mom, he gives quite an answer.
You say you love your kids, but you killed their mama.
So what?
And you're going to jail.
So what?
So you left them alone.
You what?
You left them alone.
Left them alone?
Yeah.
They got grandparents, they got other people who love them. You know, it don't matter. They mama up. You know what I'm saying?
It honestly is this callous disregard for the life that he took, as well as the effect this whole situation will have on his kid's life, that is just absolutely unfathomable to me.
Starting off this countdown, we have Charles Manson. Famous cult leader Charles Manson had the reputation for being quite wild and acting strange in his interviews. This interview that I'm about to show you was conducted by ABC News. The interviewer is questioning Manson about the murders he committed. At one point, he asks Manson to describe who he is in a sentence. What a question. And then Manson just kind of loses it.
People look at you today, 20 years later, and they still have no idea what you're about. Tell me in a sentence who you are.
That must have creeped the reporter out so bad. Like, this dude was just out of his mind. After doing all those weird expressions and body movements, he tells the reporter he is nobody.
Nobody. I'm nobody.
Just the way that he whispered that sent shivers down my spine. But that's not all he had to say.
I'm a tramp, a bum, a hobo. I'm a boxcar and a jug of wine. And a straight razor if you get too close to me.
I have no clue what any of that means. Was this Manson just putting on an act? I mean, at one point he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and paranoid delusional disorder, but some people think he was just too smart for his own good and was just faking it all. Either way, this video gives me the creeps. In our 9th spot, we have Casey Anthony. In 2008, Casey Anthony's young daughter Kaylee went missing. Casey was obviously arrested for her disappearance and death, but in the end, prosecutors were unable to conclusively tie her to her daughter's death. In this interview, we hear Casey's side of things.
What I remember is being in bed, my mom coming in before she left for work and saying goodbye to us, and then waking up several hours later. 2 hours later, and not knowing where she was.
So your parents had her?
My dad did.
Next thing you know, she's missing, right? How did it play?
I did what I was told. I don't remember too much of what happened.
Her story just doesn't add up, and everyone knows that she did it. They just can't seem to get enough evidence to prove this, and it's incredibly sad. Coming in at number 8, we have John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy was an infamous American serial killer in the 1970s, who was given the name the Killer Clown. Why? Well, he would often dress up as Pogo the Clown for neighborhood events or children's parties, which seemed to be his way of meeting his victims. In one of his interviews, he talks about why he would dress up as a clown.
The clowning was relaxation for me. I enjoyed entertaining kids. Like some people are, they unwind in different ways, either by going out drinking or that. I could put on clown makeup and I was relaxed.
That's an odd way to find relaxation, but he continues on saying he genuinely loved being a clown. The interviewer ends up asking him if he enjoyed it because he could then lure victims to him, and Gacy denies this. That's not why he liked it. He liked it because it brought him back to feelings of being a child.
I've always told people when I got into clown makeup, I regressed into childhood. It was fun being a clown because you could be yourself or just let yourself go and act a fool. You could be slapstick and funny and have a good time. That's why I always enjoyed clowning.
Just knowing the horrors that he has done makes everything he says so scary. The interview gets worse though when the interviewer starts asking questions about Gacy's victims. According to him, he doesn't remember any of the horrific deeds that he has done.
I have a lot of things that I've forgotten that I can't remember. For instance, I can go back to my childhood and stuff and I still remember that, but yet I can go into the 70s and there are a lot of things I can't remember.
He then proceeds to grab a book that is filled with his victims' pictures and information and claims that he has studied the book over and over and can't remember anything.
I don't know if you notice here, we got pictures of every one of the victims here, and believe it or not, for the last 12 years I've studied these photos of the victims, and there is no, we have a shot of all of the victims together here, and when you look over at the photos, I have no recollection of any of them. Never met them. They're just names and faces. And when you look at them, the thing of it is, we took it a step further. We went into their backgrounds. I wanted to know where they were at, what schools they attended, who they hung out with, and what kind of activities they were into. And that's what we dug up on each one of the victims.
Now, what he is saying is sick for a number of reasons. Many people believe that he still remembers his victims, but he's just faking this all. And in the end, he is receiving pleasure by learning more about his victims, and this also helps him recount what he did to them. Coming in at number 7, we have Jeffrey Dahmer. This interview of Jeffrey Dahmer that I'm about to share with you is said to be his last interview ever. It all started when Jeffrey started torturing animals at a young age. Then when he was around 14 or 15, he started to have impulses to hurt humans instead.
I don't know, it became a compulsion, and it switched from animals to humans. I still don't understand it. I don't know why.
If your fantasy life as a teenager includes killing, who do you tell?
It then just got worse and worse, according to Dahmer.
Started having obsessive thoughts of violence intermingled with sex. And it just got worse and worse. I didn't know how to tell anyone about it, so I didn't.
You thought that was bad? Well, he goes on to talk about his first kill, which happened when he was only 18 years old.
I was 18 years old, driving home. I saw this hitchhiker about a mile from my house. He caught my eye. I drove past him, thought to myself, should I stop and pick him up or should I just keep on going? I wish I just kept on going, but I didn't. I turned around, picked him up, and that's when the nightmare became a reality.
It's the fact that he can recount all these horrors with no emotion, no tone whatsoever. It's like he's reading from a script. He shows no remorse. In our 6th spot today, we have Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was known to be super intelligent, charming, and manipulative during his interviews, so interviewers had to be extremely careful. He knew exactly what people wanted to hear and carefully catered his responses to that. The interview we're going to look at today is from 1977 while Bundy was in prison. During the interview, the reporter asks him if he's nervous about the evidence that they have against him. This was his snarky little reply.
Okay, I mean, you have access to information, but I'm on the inside. I know what's there and I know what isn't there. I've seen the files and I've heard the reports. And Lord knows I'm the first and foremost person who has the personal and intimate knowledge that it couldn't be me, that it's not me, and that I'm innocent.
Although everything he was saying was a lie. He often would try to manipulate the interviewers into thinking he was innocent, when we all know that was not the case. Take a look at this next clip, for example.
What happens if you're in prison 5 years and nothing like what has happened in the past happens again?
What do you mean?
I mean, any of the things that you have been accused of by innuendo, by rumor, by the police departments or whatever. What if there are no killings, there are no kidnappings?
It's already happened, hasn't it?
The main thing to focus on here is his facial expression. The smirk, the struggling to hide a smile when the guy is talking about Bundy getting caught and going to prison. I think any normal person would be scared of being caught, especially when they know that they did it. But Bundy was so cocky and assured of himself that he thought he was gonna get away with it all. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Harold Shipman. Harold Shipman was an English doctor and serial killer. It was discovered that he took the lives of a number of patients under his care, his total number of victims being around 250. Imagine that, you go to a hospital thinking that they're gonna save you, but instead end up being the cause of your death. Now, during Harold's police interrogations, he refused to speak and refused to look at any piece of evidence that they had against him. In particular, he would not look at the photos of his victims.
Lily Crossley, if you'd like to look at that, just for the benefit of the tape. Dr. Shipman's eyes are closed and he didn't look at the photograph at all. Can you remember Lily Crossley at all? Okay, no answer.
Now, Shipman was obviously doing this so he wouldn't give anything away. But in fact, his very actions in this interview gave away everything. Investigators noticed that when they presented the victim's image in front of him, he would freeze and stop breathing for 9 seconds. So they immediately knew that there's something up with him.
That's Elizabeth Pierce. The 3 ladies there, it's the elderly lady dressed in black. For the benefit of the tape, Dr. Shipman's eyes are closed and he did not look at.
He doesn't breathe for 9 seconds after they said her name. So Elizabeth Pierce, that name is a problem for him. Something about that victim is causing his body stress, and that is one of the reasons why police knew he had done these horrific crimes. Moving on, at number 4 we have Colin Norris. Colin Norris was a nurse that was found guilty of taking the lives of 4 of his elderly patients. He would do so by injecting them with lethal doses of insulin. During his interrogation, he was adamant that he was not guilty.
You were also injecting a patient with insulin.
No, I wasn't. You're sitting there saying, you suspect, you presume, you blah blah blah.
Both men preyed on people they'd been trusted to look after.
So they brought him in for the murder of Ethel Hall. He was the last person who had been with Ethel before she slipped into a coma and sadly passed away.
Obviously, if somebody was going to kill someone, they wouldn't leave their signature, would they?
What do you mean by that?
To say that they were there. I was doing my job.
You were doing your job?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you were also injecting a patient with insulin.
No, I wasn't.
He then goes on to try and convince them why he is innocent. So they accused him of injecting her with insulin. Well, this is what he had to say in his defense.
it would have, if you say, like, somebody came and injected me with that, I would say to somebody, wait a minute, what are you doing? Even when you're giving patients their, like, morphine for through the night or whatever, when you inject them, they do make a noise, because, I mean, have you ever been injected with anything? So somebody would have noticed a noise from the patient, or if the patient was asleep, they would have certainly woke up if somebody went and injected.
The worst part is when he slipped up and literally told the interrogators that he doesn't like old people, and that's basically why he committed these crimes.
Norris admitted finding elderly patients challenging.
The smells.
The smells?
Mm-hmm. I couldn't get used to the smells. When I was bathing female patients, having to wash them down below, I found it difficult to start with, especially if they were like 80s with my gran.
That just makes me sick. He was there to look after the elderly and did the exact opposite. In our third spot, we have Eileen Wuornos. Eileen Wuornos is often considered the first female serial killer. She was found guilty of taking the lives of 7 men. This is the last interview of her before she received the death penalty.
You know, I was just wondering how you're going to be, you know, at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Are you prepared?
I'm prepared. I'm all right with it.
At this point, Eileen was proud of her murders. She didn't want to die, but she had accepted her fate. At one point, she claimed she couldn't stand being on death row any longer since she had already been there for 10 years. At this point, she just wanted to die.
Prepared yourself for tomorrow morning.
I'm all right with it. Yeah, I'm ready to go. Hey, I was tortured at BCI. They had the intercom on in the room, and they kept lying that it wasn't on, and they were using sonic pressure on my head since 1997.
This seemed to be true to Eileen. Being locked away, she started to grow paranoid. She thought that the people making her food were spitting in it, and that she was being attacked by a sonic weapon, aka the intercom. Anyways, let's move on.
What more is there to say about the cops? What more do you want to say about the cops?
A lot of stuff. Did you know that they were surveilling me before I killed? And then I knew it? Then I know that the cops knew who I was. After Richard Mallory died, I left prints everywhere, and they covered it up. And let me kill the rest of those guys to turn me into a serial killer.
If this is true, then this is incredibly messed up. And then when she gets mad, it's actually really scary.
You killed 7 men.
Yes, you
did.
did.
And I'm asking you, what got you to kill the 7 men?
And I'm telling you because the cops let me keep killing them, Nick. Don't you get it? Ladder climbs, the election, everything else. I got a big finger in all your faces. Thanks a lot. You're inhuman. You're an inhumane bunch of and you're gonna get nuked in the end. And pretty soon it's coming.
It got intense. I think her facial expressions and wide eyes make it 10 times scarier. Like if I was that interviewer, I would have peed my pants. In our second spot today, we have Paul Bernardo. Paul Bernardo is a Canadian serial killer who, along with his partner Karla Homolka, carried out a number of horrific crimes in Scarborough, Ontario. This is footage from his interview with Toronto police detectives.
Did you kill Elizabeth Bain on June the 19th, 1990?
Well, it's a loaded question. I mean, are we going to go back and go through the time sequence of what happened in my life? I mean, I could just give a yes or no answer, but you know, there's a lot of issues about that.
In a way, he reminds me of Ted Bundy, constantly tiptoeing around the questions, saying what he thinks they want to hear, and trying to outsmart them.
Hey, did you kill this person? I mean, well, you're saying I'm lying here, here, and here. I could say, no, I didn't. But, I mean, you already said I'm lying here with the PO you're saying.
Okay, I'm not saying anything about who's lying. I'm simply...
and I've given you directions to go to find the truth.
Right.
No one's done that.
And I've...
Also, take in how he is smiling throughout this, like it's fun games for him. It makes me sick. He's literally having fun with this all. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Karla Homolka. Now, we talked about her counterpart, Paul, so it's only fair that we talk about Karla herself. Basically, what happened is that Karla confessed to her roles in the murders and testified against Paul to get out of a harsher sentence. In this interview, she puts on an innocent act and tries to blame Paul for everything that they did.
He kept on pushing and pushing and pushing, and finally I said, okay.
She tried to make it seem like she was a victim and being controlled by Paul.
If I didn't turn the water tap off completely, he'd hit me. If I didn't say the right thing, he'd hit me. He held knives to my throat. He told me I better watch my back. He said, always watch your back with me.
From our understanding, this was her strategy to pin the blame all on him so she could get away with the murders. Starting off this countdown, we have Elizabeth Wetlaufer.
I've done this and I'm ready to face it, but I would love to go.
Elizabeth Wetlaufer was a Canadian registered nurse for 9 years in southwestern Ontario. In 2016, she quit her nursing job, checked herself into a psychiatric hospital, and confessed to her crimes. Apparently, between 2007 to 2016, she used her powers as a nurse to take the lives of 8 of her patients and injured 6 others. She would do so by giving them lethal doses of insulin. She also admitted to stealing opioids to fuel her personal addiction. After she confessed to the killings, an interview took place with the police, and that's when she confessed her crimes once again, this time in a detailed statement. Apparently, she had voices in her head telling her to kill those patients.
Part of me had started to believe that it was the devil, and part of me thought it might be God as a purpose through my life.
At first, she believed that this was God talking to her, so she felt okay killing for him. Then later on, she thought maybe it was the devil. On top of that, she claimed that it was a gut instinct telling her that these people needed to be killed. And once she did the deed, she would hear laughter in her chest.
Whatever it wasn't a voice in my head, it was a voice in here. And when I would do it, afterwards I would hear like a laughter in my head.
She was sentenced to 8 concurrent life sentences with no chance of parole for 25 years. In our 9th spot, we have Robert Durst. Robert Durst is an American convicted murderer and possible serial killer. It all started in 1982 with the disappearance of his wife, Kathy Durst. Obviously, he was the main suspect. Then in 2000, he murdered one of his friends, Susan Berman, and in 2001, he killed his neighbor. And just this year, he was finally convicted for killing his wife. During his interviews and interrogations, he maintained his innocence, claiming that he never did it. But after one of his final interviews, he made a grave mistake. He went to the bathroom and didn't realize that his mic was still on. While in the bathroom, he was talking to himself and basically confessed to the killings.
There it is. You're caught. Sister. What the hell did I do? Kill them all. Of course.
The interviewers were completely shocked by what they heard, and Robert was immediately arrested. In our 8th spot, we have Daniel Wozenak. Daniel Wozenak is a former community theater actor who in May of 2010 took the lives of 2 people. During that time, he was struggling financially. He was in debt and unemployed. Then when he heard that his friend Sam Herr had $62,000 from combat pay, he decided to kill Sam in order to steal his money. Then he ended up killing a woman named Julie Kabushi, a 23-year-old college student who was tutoring Sam. His plan was to make it seem like Sam killed Julie and then went on the run. But in the end, he was caught. This video is from the police interrogation of Daniel. Here's him putting the blame on Sam.
Opened the door, it was Sam. Alright. I'm like, hey man, what's going on? Everything good? And he's like, not good, we're in trouble. We need to get the out of here. And so he drove, he's like, there's a dead body in my apartment. He said he'd been doing some heavy drugs. He's like, I shot somebody. I was not happy about it. It was a fit of rage, and honestly, she had it coming. I said she.
But of course, the police weren't buying his story. It was all too convenient.
Where's the gun, Sam? What did you do with the gun?
I'm not Sam, my name's Dan.
I know, but that's what you were, wasn't that what you were asking him?
No, I have nothing to do with this because my life was in danger with my wife. I'm sorry.
How was your life in danger?
He threatened it.
The 2 interrogators could see through Daniel's act. In fact, they said it was as if he was putting on a theater show for them. In the end, Daniel did confess, but figured he might try and act insane in order to get off with lesser charges.
Money and insanity.
Money and insanity. Okay.
In our 7th spot, we have patient number 18. Now, this has got to be one of the creepiest and mysterious clips on the internet. It's an interview featuring a man named Patient 18. This interview is filmed at a psychiatric hospital, and this man is there because he has schizophrenia. This tape is actually what schools use to teach their students about schizophrenia and the mind. But it's mysterious because we don't know much about this dude. Now, I just want to say, having schizophrenia or mental health issues does not make this guy an evil person. He's on today's list because apparently at the hospital he admitted to taking someone's life. Plus, he has a history of criminal behavior. Upon doing more research, this might be a man named Stephen E. Anyways, take a look at this interview.
And what happened that ended up with your being here in the hospital?
The psychiatrist decided that this was the situation for me.
Did he tell you why?
No, the psychiatrist did not.
Has anybody told you why?
No.
I got chills. I don't know about you. It's quite interesting how he carefully plans out his answers. Plus, no matter what they're talking about, he still shows no emotion.
And in what way are you different?
I am trying to do with my life something which few people try to do. And this influences my thinking and consequently my actions.
He may seem calm on the outside, but what you can't imagine is everything that's going on in his head. You can tell he's trying hard to stay in control.
As soon as I express the belief that I do not belong in this hospital, which is a mental hospital, then those who dislike me want to find a worse place for me.
In our sixth spot, we have Alonzo Perez. In 2016, Alonzo Perez was charged for a series of crimes, including robbery with use of a deadly weapon, attempted murder with use of a deadly weapon, grand larceny, and battery. He was also arrested in connection with the death of Mohammed Robinson. This is footage of Alonzo inside of the interrogation cell waiting to be questioned. But not much of that actually happens, as he manages to escape. First, we see him looking around at the cameras, and then he decides to forcibly remove his handcuffs. Now, he does manage to get them off, but he's not ready to leave yet. He hasn't thought of a plan. So he pretends that his handcuffs are still on and he thinks of an escape plan. When he thinks of his plan, he gets up, climbs up, and escapes by crawling through the ceiling. He then drove away in a rental truck that someone left with the engine running. But don't worry, it was short-lived freedom because within days he was caught again, and in more trouble. In the end though, he did plead guilty to 3 murders. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Andre Chikatilo. Andre Chikatilo, otherwise known as the Butcher of Rostov or the Rostov Ripper, was responsible for the deaths of 56 individuals. He would lure people that he met at bus stops or train stations away to remote locations, and then he would murder them. Sometimes he would even eat certain parts of his victims. In this interview, what shocks a lot of people is the fact that everyone expects him to act like a monster, but in fact, he acts quite the opposite. He seems innocent, which is either an act or, his true personality. So he keeps up the innocent act saying how he feels sorry, blah blah blah. But the act drops when he is asked one question. Now the interview is in Russian, but I have the translation. So the interviewer asks him if he has ever thought about meeting his victims in heaven or hell. He answers with, and I quote, "No, I have never thought about that, never. I feel like it doesn't bother me. I have never thought about it. I have already passed all rounds of hell in my life. I am already ready to pass away to the other world again." That right there is creepy, not gonna lie. In our 4th spot, we have David Berkowitz, but you probably better know him as the Son of Sam. He was a serial killer who took the lives of 6 individuals and wounded 7 others in New York City for more than a year. He would typically target good-looking young women with long brown hair. As a result, a number of women were cutting their hair short or dyeing it blonde. He was eventually known as the Son of Sam because he would leave letters near his victims' bodies, signing it off with that name. In the end, he was caught and claimed that his neighbor's dog was possessed by a demon, and that this demon dog was the one telling him to kill these people. Wild, I know. Well, years later, he did this interview. He admits to being into Satanism and how it influenced him.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about Satan, what are you actually referring to?
Well, many people may not really understand that, but there was a time I was so confused and so troubled that I was seeking meaning and purpose. I was seeking something, I don't know, as my life began to spin out of control, I mean, I got involved in like Satanism, and I was reading the Satanic Bible. And
he continues on talking about himself, but a lot of people believe he was just putting on an act the whole time, that he was trying to convince people that he's normal so that he would be released early. This is pretty common among serial killers. They love to manipulate people.
How does it feel to be here for 30 years knowing that this is going to be it?
You know, it's like, you know, the expression, take one day at a time, and it's never easy, you know, being incarcerated. I have no one to blame but myself.
In our third spot, we have Michael Beaver. In July of 2015, 16-year-old Michael Beaver and his 18-year-old brother Robert took the lives of their parents and 3 siblings. They first attacked their sister. When she screamed, their mother ran out of the bedroom and they stabbed her over 50 times. Eventually, they worked their way around the house, killing their family members. It's a very scary and graphic case. In this interview, Michael completely confesses to everything to an officer.
So he was buying weapons because you guys had talked about murdering.
Yeah, and he started planning it.
Okay. That you didn't want to do it?
I don't want to do it. I didn't, just because I didn't kill anyone.
Okay.
I stabbed someone.
Who did you stab?
My younger brother, Christopher.
Christopher? How old's Christopher?
9, I think.
What did you stab him with?
My knife.
What's your knife look like?
There's literally no emotion in his voice, and for being so young, he doesn't seem affected by this at all. But here's the thing, this guy was obsessed with other killers, and the police officer noticed this and kept prying.
Because you mentioned a couple names of, are those like serial killers or something?
What, like Columbine?
Yeah.
Columbine and James Egan Holmes. James Egan Holmes is a guy that shot at the theater.
In Colorado?
Yeah, he killed 12 and...
Wow. How many were killed in Columbine?
Columbine, I don't know, like 15,
okay.
I think.
He knew the killer's first and last names and their kill count. No one just knows that information off the top of their head, so that's creepy. In our second spot, we have the BTK killer. Between the years of 1974 to 1991, American serial killer Dennis Rader took the lives of 10 individuals. In 2005, he was convicted for his crimes and was sentenced to 175 years in solitary confinement without the possibility of parole. This video is Dennis's confession to killing Maureen Hedge.
So I very carefully snuck into the house, kind of like a cat burglar, and after checking the house, she wasn't there. So about that time, the doors rattled, so I went back to one of the bedrooms and hid back there in one of the bedrooms.
He then proceeded to talk about how he stayed in her house for hours until the next morning when he woke up and strangled her.
No, I manually strangled her when she started to scream.
So you used your hands?
Yes, sir.
And you strangled her? Did she die?
Yes.
It's chilling seeing him talk so casually about all of this. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Issei Sagawa.
たった指先ほどの小さな銃弾を放ったことによってさまざまな人たちを傷つけ、あるいは変えてしまう。
If you haven't heard of this case, then brace yourself because it's a very dark and gruesome one. In 1981, Issei Sagawa killed and ate a woman named Renee Hartfelt. Apparently, he always had a fantasy to eat a beautiful human. When he saw Renee, he knew she was the one. On June 11th, 1981, he invited her over, and then he shot her at the back of the neck and then ate her over the next 2 days. That's not even the worst part. The worst part is that he was never convicted of his crimes. He literally spent 2 days in jail, then was sent back to Japan, and then he became a celebrity there. He was so famous that he made a living through the public's interest in his crime. Imagine that, literally becoming wealthy for killing someone. He's guilty, he's even admitted to it, but he never got penalized. Here are some disturbing moments from an interview with him.
多分もう一晩でも食事をルネとしていたら食べる対象には考えたことはない。自分の書いたシナリオ、ずっと前からそういうシチュエーションを考えて、どっから食べる、どうやってやる、全てこう頭の中にシナリオができてた。
He continues on, going into gruesome details about his murder and about another time that he attacked a different woman. I personally had a hard time sitting still watching this. It's just way too much.